Hello, world singers! I'm Brooke.
And I'm Tyler.
And this is
Cosmere Conversations. We have a fantastic episode for you today about one of the most interesting characters in the Cosmere and one of the most important characters to understand the Cosmere.
Yeah, definitely. We gave kind of a brief introduction to him last time, and we are going to really get into the character of Hoid, or should I say the character known as Hoid,
yes,
today.
Many different names for Mr. Hoid, but true world singers will know that Hoid is a crossover character that exists in every single book in the Cosmere universe. Most of the time, this is as a very small kind of background character, and occasionally in things like the Stormlight Archive,
a much bigger character.
Yeah. And one who even has his own little epilogue at the end of...
Yeah. Oh, man, that's so good. But I feel like as sort of a baby Cosmere reader, Hoid is like one of the first hints that you get that there's more happening like beyond the books. Like, he's like your first introduction to the Cosmere as such, I feel like.
Absolutely. He knows what is going on with the Cosmere, one of the most knowledgeable characters in the universe, and probably, I mean, there might be more knowledgeable characters out there, but I think from the reader's perspective, he is the most knowledgeable character.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I don't think there's anyone that we would classify as more in the know than Hoid.
Yeah.
So, when...
Because he also, sorry, might be running ahead a little bit too far, but
run right away.
Yeah. I think we have a word of Brandon that he is the second oldest character in the Cosmere. So in terms of like knowledge, yeah, like he's been there the whole time.
And that is we'll talk about the powers or the abilities of Hoid. And one of them is hinted at that long-lasting life and the ability to heal from injuries is going to make him one of the oldest characters in the Cosmere. So let's go. Let's start talking about Mr. Hoid, because he's in everything. So you want to start with kind of what his different... appearances are?
Yeah, let's talk about where you can find Hoid. So again, if you are sort of a intro reader to the Cosmere listening to this podcast, this is where you can find him.
Absolutely. And we're just going to go book by book. And we'll kind of add little things here and there, but starting with the earliest book, Elantris, Hoid has a very small role as a beggar. Mm-hmm. And the beggar role is going to be one that Hoid adopts more than once.
Basically every beggar I see now, I'm like, is that Hoid? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Because he's a beggar just all the time.
It does seem like he's a beggar quite often. And Elantris is the first time that we see Hoid as a beggar. Now, what's interesting to note about Elantris, and what some people may actually be unaware of, is that Elantris had, would you say it's a rewrite or just an additional kind of chapter added
It's like a weird thing because Elantris was one of the first Cosmere books that Brandon Sanderson put out. And so it has gone through a few different iterations as Brandon has grown and, you know, his writing skills and things like that. Like I know the initial version, the map wasn't what he wanted to be. It didn't really work for the way he's trying to work it into the magic system. Mm-hmm. So they redid the map. There's a version of Elantris in which there is, I believe it's like an epilogue kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where we see Hoid diving into the shard pool, attempting to become an Elantrian.
Yes.
But it doesn't work, and he comes out and he's like, dang it. Like,
yeah,
I tried, but like, guess that's not going to work.
So if you were a reader early on of Brandon's work and you were not aware of this little epilogue or kind of additional Hoid chapter, in the original Elantris, he appears as a beggar, and it's really just a one-off. I don't even know if they mention him by name in the original.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's not significant, because the significant aspect is that Hoid tries to become an Elantrian, and it doesn't work out. And that's something that we're going to see throughout all of the Cosmere novels, is that Hoid is almost like collecting powers of different types of investiture from around the Cosmere. Collecting is probably the wrong word. He's becoming invested in all the different ways by all the different shards.
Yeah,
it does not work out.
A crazy number of
powers,
which we'll go into.
Yeah. So, what is the next appearance of Hoid?
So, if we want to stay on the same world of Cell, where Elantris is, we also have the Emperor's Soul, which is one of those short stories. And Hoid appears, well, he doesn't really appear, but you hear tell of him as the Imperial Fool who betrays Shy and is like the whole impetus behind the story. Like the whole reason she's even in prison, like doing this job, is because Hoid like ratted her out.
Yeah, and so we kind of get this impression that Hoid is not necessarily the villain, but certainly not helping out our main character in the Emperor's Soul.
I mean, I feel
from the character's perspective.
Sure, yeah, from the character's perspective, she's like pissed at him. Like, I think even like when she escapes eventually, like one of the last things she says is, "I'm gonna go find that Imperial Fool and like
teach
pay
him
him back." Yeah.
Exactly. Now, from a reader's perspective, in the broader Cosmere, it's possible that what Hoid was doing there by making sure that Shy is captured, is that it kind of sets her down the path to do something important.
Right. It's like one of those things, like we talk about God, right? Like, yeah, you could look at this as like a terrible thing, but like, you know, maybe this is the thing that you are like meant to do all your life. And she does kind of have that perspective of like, this is an incredible task that I'm doing that no one has attempted to do before. You know, it kind of like brings her into her own. So, you know.
Absolutely. So Hoid is playing at a bigger game than just making sure that like everyone is happy around him or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think just like Hoid's identity as, you know, one of the oldest people in the Cosmere, I don't think he's capable of playing small.
The next time that we see Hoid, and we're going to jump planets here, from Cell to Scadrial in the Mistborn Era 1 series. Now, there's 3 books in Era 1, and then obviously 3 current books in Era 2 released, with a plan for 1 more in Era 2. And Hoid has appearances in almost every single one of them. We see him also in Mistborn's Secret History, so a bunch of stuff to kind of go through on the planet Scadrial. Let's start with, once again, him appearing in, I believe, book 1 and 2 as a informant.
In Mistborn?
Mistborn Era 1, books 1 and 2. So, The Final Empire and Well of Ascension. We have Hoid appearing as a beggar and also an informant to Kelsier. But it's really in Mistborn Book 3, Era 1, Book 3.
See, that's why this is confusing. We should just call them Mistborn and then Alloy of Law.
Thank you to the good friends over
this
on the
dumb.
Reddit.
Why do I want to say Mistborn Era 1, Book 1? Like, stupid.
You can call them by their title as well. I believe calling them eras is what the fans want. Thank you, fans.
I think it's stupid, and I am a fan, so.
Thank you, fans on the Reddit. We appreciate you supporting me. I very much appreciate that. So, in Mistborn Era 1, Hero of Ages, Book 3, the role of Hoid expands quite rapidly or radically when he becomes a impromptu leader.
Yeah, I forget who, like, runs into them. Someone's, like, on the road, and they run into, you know, a group of Terrace people that have fled from the Terrace homeland. They're, like, refugees. Mm-hmm. And the leader of that little group of Terrace refugees, we find out, is Hoid.
I could be wrong, but I think it's Tensoon. I'm just going off my memory.
Oh, it could be.
Because he's running back and forth.
That's right. Yeah, he has, like, this epic journey of, like, Forrest Gump.
But either as a dog or a horse with, like, multiple limbs.
Oh, yeah!
But yeah, Hoid is leading the Terrace refugees down from their homeland to safety as the world is ending. Mm. And we know that eventually when Harmony kind of saves the world and recreates the world that we will see in Mistborn Era 2, one of the things that he does is he kind of protects, either in caves or different regions, he kind of creates like a little vortex of protection around the people and then remakes the world around them so that then they come out of those little protective... So cool. Yeah, exactly.
Literal rebirth from the earth. Anyway, that's a tangent. In Mistborn Secret History, we see Hoid as the person Kelsier calls Drifter. So remember, Mistborn Secret History is running parallel to all of the books in Mistborn. So in Mistborn, there's this part, it's pretty small. Vin is going to meet with an informant, and she's like hopping along, doing her allomancy, and she feels this weird like shadow presence kind of following her, and she's trying to lose it, but she can't like ever catch a glimpse of this thing that she feels. And then she just feels kind of weird, and she's like, I'm not going to meet with this informant. And she leaves. She ditches the mission.
It's literally like a paragraph or two.
Yeah, it's not very long at all.
But what we know because of Mistborn Secret History is that Hoid rode in to the cognitive realm on the shoulders of a spirit or a soul. Yeah. He went through the Well of Ascension into the physical realm so that he could pick up a bead. What are those called? Bead of Lerasium?
Yeah.
A bead of Lerasium. While Kelsier is also stuck at the Well of Ascension. So Hoid and Kelsier have this interaction at the Well of Ascension. Hoid leaves, because he can do that. And then Kelsier escapes from the Well of Ascension, along with Ruin as well. Oops, my bad, Ben. But it's at the point when Kelsier is able to be free of the Well of Ascension that he's following Vin, and Kelsier sees that the informant she's going to meet is Hoid, who he only knows as Drifter.
Right. So then we find out that one, informant is Hoid. Two, that sort of like shadow presence that Vin was feeling following her was Kelsier, trying to like scare her off.
Exactly.
And he succeeds. So I thought that was one of the most interesting or like cool parallels there.
It shows both kind of the role that Hoid is always playing and Kelsier kind of adopts, is that there's the story going on and then there's these other characters who are playing in the background of their own story. Exactly. Exactly. Like in... Never mind, I was going to go off on a government tangent. Not important. I was going to say the shadow government of the English parliamentary system.
Oh, yes, of course, of course.
Everybody knows that.
Okay, let's stay with our fictional politics here.
When we get to Mistborn Era 2...
also known as Alloy of Law.
Excellent. We see Hoid again as
a beggar. Hey, one of his favorite roles. I would say like beggar and then like Imperial Fool type character are his two like go-tos.
Exactly. And that actually tells us a little bit about Hoid in my perspective, is that he does fall into those two categories quite often. Beggar and jester or fool.
Yeah.
And I really think that those roles are significant for kind of the same reason, which is that both a beggar and a fool are around but not often seen or cared about by the people. So beggars are just kind of blending into the background. The fool is a person who is able to be at all the fancy parties and interact with all the fancy people, but he's not treated the same or considered the same by those fancy light eyes or wherever he happens to be. So I kind of see both of those roles as someone who can be around but is not seen directly.
They have like access to a lot of places, but they're not always in the limelight. Yeah, that's definitely true. I was also going to say those two types of characters have a unique ability to be able to speak their mind without being taken too seriously, which is important for his character, right? Because if he's trying to influence events, he needs to be able to say what he needs to say without arousing too much suspicion. So as a beggar, you know, people can just be like, oh, that's just a crazy beggar. Like, who cares what he's talking about? As a fool, he's able to say a lot of things and not get too much flack for it because that's his job, to, like, say crazy things.
Now, I think it's in Mistborn Era 2, Book 3, Bands of Mourning, where the beggar has an interaction with Wax.
Yeah,
and it's a very significant
so
one.
Significant.
Because in this moment when Wax and his lovely lady, Steris, are going to a fancy pants party, they come across Hoid as a beggar, and Hoid and Wax have a back and forth, and then Hoid throws a coin at Wax that really sets him down the path that is going to lead to all the events in that story. And the coin itself, we will find out, is a medallion from the southern people, something with Nikrasil, and I'm not sure about the other metal.
I'm not sure either.
And it's not
super important.
Yeah, it's not super significant, but it's a dual, it's a coin or a medallion with two metals, Nikrasil and another type. We eventually find out that the people from the south are able to create these medallions to allow anyone the powers of certain Mistborn.
I think that coin is actually copper mined, right?
Yeah, you're totally right, because it is significant. I lied. The ability of a copper mine is to store memories, and Wax gets this coin from Hoid, and then he taps in to the memory, and the memory itself is...
Yeah, it's like a memory from... I don't know if we know... Well, it's that weird thing where they call him the Lord Ruler, but we think it might be Kelsier?
Exactly.
So, like, Wax is calling it the Lord Ruler. He thinks he's living through a memory of the Lord Rulers. And I think he like, arrives in southern Scadrial and, like, saves the world, sort of.
Yes, or at least
it's super significant, though.
Saves a group of people. And I believe that while the play throughout the story is that it's the Lord Ruler who went down to these people of the South, and they think it's the Lord Ruler.
Right. Because
of the ending of Mistborn's Secret History and the ending of Bands of Mourning, we actually know that it is Kelsier, or at least I'm pretty confident that the memory is actually
because I think even in the memory, like, he sees his arms, like, all scarred. So that would make us think that it's, you know, the survivor of Hathsin.
Yes. One of the other interesting things about that conversation between Wax and Beggar Hoid is that Hoid drops a hint, or just says outright, that he owns the mansion that Wax is about to go into with the big party.
Yeah, because they're like, what are you doing here? Like, why is there a beggar at this fancy place? Like, he should have been, you know, scared off the ground.
Yeah, and he's like, well, technically I own the place. And that always struck me as strange. I wasn't quite sure what he meant. Now, one of the things is that he could literally be an owner of many parts of the territory of Scadrial. Like, He's talked about the mercantile system that exists between the different Cosmere worlds. So he could, because he exists for a very long time, I'm not sure if you guys recognize this, but compound interest is a powerful force. And Hoid has all of eternity that we know of to make money. So he could literally have just bought up places in Scadrial that he found significant for Cosmere reasons.
Sure.
And he just wants to own, outright. My reading of it originally, though, gave me the impression that maybe he had, come to an agreement with Harmony, the holder of both those shards.
Oh, there's some cosmic deal where he sort of is the owner of Scadrial?
Not Scadrial, because obviously...
Elendel?
It's not in Elendel. It's in New Saran.
Oh.
So that's the kind of up-and-coming city that's on the outskirts of the beautiful paradise that Harmony's created. Elendel is in the center, and obviously Harmony's going to be very focused on Elendel. But maybe it's possible that Hoid was like, hey, you're real busy with that. I want this city over here for some reason. Now, we don't have any knowledge about that.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start.
But all we know is that he said that he owned that mansion.
Right.
And...
Well, he didn't say he owned the mansion. He said, I own the place.
True.
Just saying.
It's
a different thing.
We could find out some more because Hoid is supposed to be a more significant character in the Mistborn Era 3 and 4 than he has been, the beggar role.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense.
So, what
else do we got?
Yeah, let's look at the next spot with Hoid, where he actually manifests and shows some of his powers.
Yeah, in Warbreaker, he appears as the storyteller that comes to Ciri at the palace and tells her a historical story. But he does so with all of these, colored powders that, turn into shapes as he throws them into the air while he's storytelling. And that is a similar thing that we see for his characters throughout. We kind of see him storytell like that in Rashar, which we'll talk about. Yeah.
And I think one of the really interesting things about him on Nalthis, yes, in Warbreaker, is that with Ciri and Lightsong, he plays much more of the what I call kind of the upfront Hoid, or the real Hoid, than a character or a face that he's pointing on. Now, he even says later that Hoid is also a face that he kind of puts on and it's not his real self. But the idea of Hoid as the storyteller is something that I feel is real significant to his deep character.
Yeah, I would very much agree. And I think with that, can we just dive into his appearances in Stormlight?
Because that's where he's the most Hoid.
Yes, definitely. We see the most of Hoid in Stormlight. But in Stormlight, we see him as a world singer.
Yes.
All of you lovely little world singers out there. Who are storytellers that tell stories of other places.
Other cultures.
Yeah, exactly. Of the people in other places and what their, traditions are and histories and things like that. So I think that's a perfect depiction of Hoid's identity as a storyteller.
Yeah, and we'll get into this a little bit more later, but Hoid is, we believe, one of the founding members of World Singers on Rashar. Yeah,
I would definitely, if not, Cosmere wide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, on Rashar, Hoid plays...
We see him as so many different things.
Everything. I mean, he's in Stormlight 1, The Way of Kings, and Words of Radiance. He also makes an appearance in Edge Dancer, I believe.
Oh, man, I know. Someone called us out on the Reddit because we haven't mentioned Edge Dancer yet, and that was, such a good call, so...
Absolutely.
Thanks, man. We totally neglected that, and it's awesome.
Edge Dancer is, of course, referring to Lift, who's one of the interlude characters that we meet in the Stormlight Archive, and then gets her own book and will become more important in the larger Stormlight Archive well, I guess Edge Dancer qualifies as a novella, not a book. But Hoid is everywhere in the Stormlight Archive. So he plays Wit. Wit is the jester.
Imperial Fool.
Or the Imperial Fool, absolutely. For King Elokar.
Yeah.
And as the role of Wit, or the King's Wit, he is tasked with insulting or putting down or otherwise making clever, funny comments at the expense of many of the princes or other fancy light eyes.
Yeah, so he says some good stuff there, and they're like always making comments about how he just like disappears and then like reappears. And they're like, where'd Wit go? I don't know, haven't seen him in a couple weeks, and then he just like shows up again.
Very much kind of here and there.
But as you said, like his role as a Wit sort of gives him that freedom of being able to be there when he wants to, and like no one really cares when he's not there.
It also hints at the kind of underlying ability of Wit, which is said to be something akin to the fact that Hoid is interested in moments that are worthy of stories. And there are occasionally times when he shows up on a planet or shows up at an event, nothing interesting that a story could be told about that moment, and so he just like leaves. He's just like, no, this isn't what I'm here for, and then just goes somewhere else. Now on Rashar, not only does he play Wit, this Imperial Fool character, he also has very significant interactions with both Dalinar and Kaladin. Do we want to talk about some of those? And Shallan.
Yeah.
So all three of the big main characters. I mean,
I feel like you can pretty much assume that if anything important is going on, or if there is any important character, Hoid has probably interacted with them. Because as Tyler just said, like, that's what he does. He shows up where the important stuff is going on. And so he shows up, he's like in the desert, right? Or on the Shattered Plains with this little fire, like playing his little flute when Kaladin goes out for a walk, like contemplating serious things as Kaladin does.
Thank you for the Kaladin voice. That was great.
Thank you.
So Kaladin goes out to the Shattered Plains, sees Wit with this little flyer playing his flute, and Wit is once again going to tell a story to Kaladin. The first story that he tells
is Darethil and the Wandersail.
Darethil and the Wandersail. The significance of the story is complicated. It's kind of upfront for what Kaladin's dealing with. It kind of makes sense in the Way of Kings as just like, oh, this is referencing what I'm going through right now.
Right.
Because it's the story about a ship that sails to an kind of idyllic, perfect island where everything seems to be wonderful and happy and all the people are lovely. But any time that a person makes any type of mistake, no matter how small, they are killed by the rest of the community in a very like harsh punishment.
Yeah.
And the explorer, Darethil, is going to be questioning this, and they're like, oh, well, the king doesn't tolerate any type of
imperfection.
Yeah,
and that's what they say every time he asks. And so finally he's like, okay, who is this king that is like so, cruel towards his people and has this very intolerant view? And so he goes up to this tower where like no one has been in years. Everyone's like, I don't know. I've never seen the king, but like that's what he said. So he goes up to the tower to see the king, and turns out the king is dead, like has been dead for years and years and years. It's just this skeleton basically up in the tower. And he comes down and he shows them, this is the king that you've been following.
And then they realize that all the horrors that they've committed, all the people that they've killed, wasn't the responsibility of any king, but was in fact their own fault, their own choices and their own decisions. And there's other things going on with that story and the story that Wit tells Kaladin in the second Stormlight Archive, Words of Radiance.
And in both of these stories, we see that same sort of method of storytelling. Yes. In this instance, he uses the smoke from his fire and sort of, I mean, it's hard to say if it is actually turning into shapes. Like, Kaladin's not sure, but he knows that when he's listening to the story, Kaladin starts to really, like, visualize everything that's going on, and he feels like he can hear the sound of the ocean and see the ship, and there's some kind of illusion magic going on there that we suspect could be light weaving, but who knows? Hoid has a lot of secrets.
Yes. Light weaving kind of makes the most sense, but it could be other magic systems as well, or even though I don't think this, it could just be like he's a good storyteller and Kaladin is visualizing, what he wants to see.
I mean, I think it's probably a combination. I think Hoid is a really great storyteller.
Because the second story that he tells Kaladin is all about Fleet. Fleet, the man who ran until he died, until he gave his all. And once again, applying to the moment that Kaladin is in.
Yeah, very poignant.
Yeah, Words of Radiance. But also hinting at other things as well. How many of the Shard Honor could be kind of said to experience a similar thing. Like, keep fighting, keep pushing until eventually
he shatters.
Defeated. Yeah. So Hoid's a storyteller. He has some magic, and one of the things that he says to Dalinar when asked about his name, because Dalinar knows him only as Wit, Hoid says this to Dalinar in Way of Kings. I've abandoned my real name, but when next we meet, I'll think of a clever one for you to call me. Until then, Wit will suffice. Or, if you must, you may call me Hoid. So that's where we kind of get the confirmation that Wit is Hoid, and it's really the first time in in the All Cosmere that we are very clearly given that connection.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's interesting that we also find out that neither one of those is his real name.
Yes.
Right? So, like, I feel like we think of Hoid as, like, he puts on all these disguises, but underneath them all, he's Hoid. And then we find out, like, no, there's another level. He abandoned his real name. Hoid is not even his actual name.
So tell us about that conversation that he has with Kaladin.
Oh, yeah.
About his real name.
Yeah, that conversation is...
Do you want to play it out? Like, active?
Yeah, absolutely. Because honestly, that's, like, the most we ever hear about him and his origin. So, do you want to be Kaladin? I'll be Hoid.
Sure, that sounds great.
Okay, cool. So, Kaladin is having a conversation with Hoid. He asks Hoid what his name is.
Yeah.
Hoid says, I've many. I began life as a thought, a concept, words on a page. That was another thing I stole, myself. Another time, I was named for a rock, a beautiful one, and one that became completely worthless for my wearing it.
Well, what do men call you now?
Many a thing, and some of them polite. Almost all are true, unfortunately. You, however, may call me Hoid.
Your name?
No. The name of someone I should have loved. Once again, this is a thing I stole. It's something we thieves do.
So, Hoid has just given us piece
so much
after piece
information.
After piece. Let's just take it, like, one by one, because, honestly, I feel the most significant part of that is the very first line. Could you repeat it once more about how he began life?
Yeah. I began life as a thought, a concept, words on a page.
And then he says, that's another thing I stole, myself.
Yeah.
So, I think this is meta. I
yes!
think it's
Oh my gosh.
meta.
Which seems like, I don't know, on some level I feel like adding that meta layer is just adding, like, too much to something
Can't
that's
handle it,
already
Brandon.
so complicated.
But I'm pretty sure that this is a meta hint to... So we know that Hoid was first played with by Brandon as a character in his master's thesis, Dragonsteel Prime, which is kind of the start of the Cosmere in many respects. But it's
so
not...
Hoid is, like, literally meta, the oldest character in the Cosmere.
Exactly. Well, the second oldest character, because the oldest character, I believe, is also from Dragonsteel Prime, who's just a little bit more significant, or older than Hoid. We'll talk about that another day, but Dragonsteel might give you a hint to what that character is. The idea of Brandon being a new author, writing in college or in his post bachelor degree work and trying to come up with characters. Think about what that's like for people. Maybe you've tried writing before, maybe you haven't, but often what I think many authors experience is that they write a character that is very boring, very flat, very two-dimensional, stereotypical, cliche, whatever. It's not a real character. It's nothing. It's a thought. It's a concept. You want it to be more.
Right. Yeah, it's sort of like a paradigm or an archetype of a character, right? They're not like a fully fleshed out human.
Exactly. And then what I imagine is that Brandon may have had this experience of writing this character of Hoid and it being very two-dimensional, and then all of a sudden in Brandon's brain it feels like everything just starts to pile into place.
Yeah, and I think there's
Hoid
that
starts to come alive
sort
as
of
a character.
Mystical thing of inspiration.
Yes.
Right? This like sort of idea of creativity that we don't really know where it comes from, and suddenly characters seem to take on a life of their own. They seem to live outside of what you are determining for them. And all of a sudden this character in your head is like doing things that you're like, wait, what? Like, I didn't plan that. Yeah, so that's really interesting.
And then it goes into the next part of his statement where he says, "Another time I was named for a rock, a beautiful one and one that became completely worthless for my wearing it." I'm not 100% certain, and I don't think that we've had any type of confirmation word of Brandon style, but to be named after a rock sounds a little bit like how we name people, vessels, after the shard that they carry.
I think we actually do have confirmation that Hoid was not a shard.
I agree that he was not a shard, but what if he picked one up temporarily? Maybe
you think he's a splinter?
Yes, because
a sliver of
infinity, yes. Because, one, think about his overall kind of mission in different spots.
I don't know. I don't think so. That just doesn't seem like Hoid to me. I feel like he is more... He wants to kind of be on the outside so that he can, like, manage everything. Like, I feel like taking up the shard to him would be getting too involved.
I agree. And that's why I don't think it's a permanent stasis. I don't believe he is a shard currently.
Well, yeah,
but maybe in the distant past, or in a moment of destruction of Dominion or...
Oh, Devotion,
he picked up one of those shards temporarily.
Maybe. I really
anything's
don't know. Possible.
Yeah, the idea of being named after a rock is kind of similar, because we know these shards are picked up.
But then he says it becomes worthless for his wearing it. And that doesn't fit to me, because even if he picks it up and lets it go, it doesn't become worthless. You know what I mean? Or like if it was in the destruction of Devotion and Dominion, they would have already been destroyed, quote unquote, worthless before he picked it up.
Again, just something I'm throwing out. You
for sure.
Welcome to like disagree or talk to me on the Reddit.
Theory.
Yeah. Cosmere Convo on Twitter or on the Reddit. We got a Facebook page. Like, we're just tossing things out. Theory time is a great time. Now, what about back in Warbreaker, about the method of storytelling that he talks about with Lightsong?
Oh, yeah, and I think it's Siri who is like, wow, you're such a great storyteller. Like, where did you learn that? And he says, I learned it many, many years ago from a man who didn't know who he was, Your Majesty. It was a distant place where two lands meet and gods have died.
Exactly.
Oh man, like where is that?
Yeah, so he learned storytelling where two lands meet and gods have died. Now that could be his home, and we know his home.
Yeah, I would assume it would be Yolen, which, gods have died. That's where Adonalsium was shattered.
Yes. So I could see that absolutely being, his home planet. That's where he learned storytelling. Maybe that's what he was originally, some type of storyteller, some type of author. It's definitely continuing to hint, a single line in Warbreaker continually hinting at the scope of Hoid's experience and knowledge.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of that kind of experience and knowledge of Hoid and his history and also his powers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've already talked about a few of the special skills that he has in his storytelling, but we also know that he has the ability to change his appearance and adopt those disguises that we see him in. That being said, a lot of times he is described similarly anyway. He's described to have like a hawk-like nose, often an arrow-like face, and to be tall and thin. I know anytime anyone's described as having a hawk-like nose, I'm always like, Hoid, is that you? A lot of times it's not, but sometimes it is.
it often, that phrase, hawk-like, is often associated with Hoid. So if you're reading that and you see somebody with a hawk-like face, tall, thin, maybe carrying a thin blade.
And often wearing black, too. He's in black a lot.
Yes, and sometimes, when he's not a beggar, sharply dressed in black.
Yeah.
Stylish, but not, trying too hard.
Yeah.
Just super cool. That's Hoid.
But we know that he can change his appearance. So, a lot of times as the beggar, he appears as, an older person with white hair, things like that.
He has some type of light weaving like ability that we've seen through the smoke and the manipulation of colors. Even the sound that he plays with the flute he eventually gives to Kaladin. Kaladin describes that the way that the sound is being played as also creating the story. He can
he's manipulating the story with the flute.
Yes.
That's really cool.
Yes. And so when he's talking about Fleet running faster and faster, he picks up the speed of the flute, and Kaladin, he can see it visually, but he can also hear, the steps and the pounding and the breathing heavily, and, everything is kind of being experienced in multiple ways.
Yeah, so maybe there's more going on. It could be that Hoid is using light weaving and some other skill that we haven't seen yet, at the same time.
Yes. Because we do know that he has quite a bit of breaths. At least breaths, the type of investiture from Nalthis, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in the book Warbreaker, investiture takes the form of breaths, each person generally being born with one, and you can have that breath, or you can give up that breath voluntarily, and then people with more breaths have more magical abilities.
Yeah, so we know that Hoid at least has the second heightening because he says that he has perfect pitch, and that is the second heightening on Nalthis. So we know that at least he has that much breath. He could have way more than that and have more abilities.
We also know that he is the most experienced, or certainly one of the most experienced, world hoppers.
Yeah, for sure.
That kind of comes just by default. He's on every planet. He is everywhere.
And he seems to be able to do it very quickly.
Yes. One
and
of the
easily.
Things that Brandon actually said is that Hoid has a power of time dilation and has moved forward through time without living through all of the intermediate years.
Yeah.
So Hoid, in some type of way, it could be allomantically, it could be another type of magic that we are not aware of, but Hoid has the ability to kind of rapidly go through time. There was that Adam Sandler movie called Click where he could fast forward through the boring parts of his life.
Yeah.
And
that's basically what Hoid has done. So he's, been around for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
But he hasn't actually lived through all 2,000 because he just will jump ahead.
Exactly.
To the next exciting thing.
And along that line of allomantic ability, we know that Hoid is a Mistborn, or at least has the potential to be a full Mistborn.
Right, because we know he stole the bead of Loresium.
Yes.
We do not have confirmation if he swallowed it. He may just be holding on to it for some unknown reason, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But we do know, he at least has some allomantic powers, I think, because we see him on several occasions drinking from a flask the same way a Mistborn does. Shallan in Words of Radiance watches him pour some powder into his drink. So I think he at least has a few allomantic powers. And
Before he picked up the beads.
And he at least has the potential to be a Mistborn.
Yes. And I think that my theory right now is that he somehow got allomantic abilities without the beat of the racing.
Yeah, definitely.
And that he has not become a full Mistborn yet. It could be used as a bargaining chip in some type of back and forth between the higher powers.
Yeah, that's what I'm inclined to believe also. Because remember, I think we might have already said this, but Lerasium is one of the god metals. So it's a tiny, tiny, tiny piece of a shard. So that could be significant for other reasons outside of allomancy.
We also know that Hoid has the ability to heal himself. He has the ability to heal himself to a degree that very few other characters that we've seen have. He can repair or regenerate severed body parts. So he gets an arm chopped off. He can regrow that entirely. He obviously is very, very old, but this healing power to me hints at feruchemical ability, which would be a gold mine, much like Wayne in Mistborn Era 2.
Brandon has actually said that if Hoid's head was severed, he would be able to grow it back. So he has,
this is always my question.
Really intense, regenerative powers.
This is always my question for Wolverine or Hoid-like characters. Do they regrow the head from the shoulders up, or do they regrow a body from the head down?
What?
Is the head the important thing? Or his body would regrow a head, or would his head regrow a body?
Probably both.
So there would be two Hoids.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Ew, weird! I feel like it would be whatever is the largest piece would regrow.
You would think
and the other part would just wither away.
Sure.
Oh god.
But he also, a head is important. It's got his brain and stuff. So maybe that is the thing that I don't.
Maybe. Who knows?
Super weird. So we know that his powers of regeneration are significant in the physical realm, but they're also significant in the spirit realm and cognitive realm, we assume as well. The spirit web, which we talked about last week in the romantic theory episode, hugely significant. Everybody has a spirit web. Everything has a spirit web. All the spirit webs are connected. And things like shard blades, in large part, affect the spirit web.
Yeah, well, I think most types of investiture somehow alter your spirit web.
Yes.
So, if you are a Mistborn, the reason you're a Mistborn is because you have, it's kind of like DNA, right?
Yeah.
So you have that specific code in your spirit web to make you a Mistborn.
It's also, in my opinion, why Lopin is able to regrow his arm, but Kaladin cannot heal the brands on his forehead. Lopin gets to be Squire Windrunner because of Kaladin. In Lopin's spirit web, he has a full arm. And so when he gets this power, he regrows his arm because it's part of his spirit web. But Kaladin has changed his spirit web because of the torture and the abuse and the physicality.
That's very interesting.
To say, part of my spirit web is this brand. I am dangerous. I'm a slave.
This is part of my identity.
And that's why he can't heal his scars on his head, even though he has incredible regenerative powers through investiture.
That's really great. I actually never thought of that. I was just reading that part in Words of Radiance. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Good point. Why can't he heal his brands?
Because I think it's part of his spirit web.
Yeah, that's an awesome call.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Thank you. Idea with Hoid that I find most interesting is actually what he says about killing or hurting other people.
Yeah!
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Basically, there's a few points throughout the stories where he subtly references being ineffectual at violence or somehow being either not disposed to harm or unable to harm other people in any significant kind of way.
Mm-hmm. Now, he says this a bunch of times throughout the different series. He says that he cannot easily kill, hinting that he can kill them, but it's just not easy, because of certain things in his past.
And I feel like this is so interesting because it kind of speaks toward that meta thing that we were talking about earlier, where if his character was specifically written to be non-violent or harming, he only has so much flexibility within that, right? Because that is how he is defined at his origin. And
he can't violate that, but he also knows that restriction is there because he knows that he is a character in a book.
Yes! Oh my god! So he probably sort of has his ways around it, but as he says, it's not easy for him because it's literally not a part of his makeup.
Rock says that he cannot hurt anybody because it's forbidden by other gods. So
and Rock sees him, the Horn-Eaters see him as like a trickster god. That's who they interpret Hoid as, because they see him like coming and going from other worlds through a shard pool.
A Loki type character from Norse mythology and now the Marvel universe. But the trickster god, absolutely. So that's important. The Horn-Eaters are more cosmerically aware than other people on Roshar. Not everybody on Roshar, but generally their ethnicity is more
than the Alethi, for sure.
Absolutely. And so calling Hoid the trickster god is, in my mind, really significant because it hints at the fact that he is of the same place and maybe time as the other vessels, but is also not at their level. Once again, the Imperial Fool character, he's not a prince.
He's the cosmic Imperial Fool.
Exactly. And he goes further. Hoid goes further. He tells a young Shallan, "You needn't fear me. I'm terribly ineffective at hurting people. I blame my upbringing."
So part of that's a joke, obviously.
Yes.
But it just is another, we just hear him say this over and over again. Like, I'm not good at hurting people. I can't do this.
Until he really wants to, because Kelsier gets the shit kicked out of him by Hoid. Sorry, censors on iTunes. But he does. And then Hoid immediately kind of feels bad about it and backs away and is like, I'm not going to hurt you permanently, but I'm happy to beat the shit out of your cognitive self.
Yeah, he's like, look, I had to do what I had to do. I can't really hurt you, but please don't be a jerk, dude. Don't make me hurt you.
And I think it's also a word of Brandon that he has said that of all his characters, Kelsier is the one that most deserves to be punched in the face.
Yeah, I think he did.
So I think some of this is just Hoid playing Brandon.
I think he also said Kelsier would be there's a thread about a brawl between all of Brandon's characters, who would win in a brawl, and he was like, well, maybe Kelsier, because Kelsier would fight dirty, but everyone would want to beat him up.
Exactly. Now, one of the connections that I have made between this trait of Hoid is back to the Mistborn Era 2 character, Wayne. So we have Wax as the star, but, he's the star with his best friend, Wayne. And Wayne is a character that does not use guns, even though they're in, a Wild West type of setting. He uses kind of sticks or a staff that he can split in half. And his reason for avoiding guns and avoiding killing people is played out in book 3 in a super emotional way. And I read book 3 before we started this podcast. And Wayne meets Wax after Wayne kills a man by shooting him, and he orphans the young daughter of this man. And in Bands of Mourning, Wayne goes to visit this young girl, apparently something that he does yearly or maybe monthly, but he goes to visit her. And I
think it's like a whole family, actually. There's like a few.
I think she's at like a university.
It's like a school, yeah, I think.
So I don't necessarily think that they're all family members.
I thought there was like a couple sisters, but I could be wrong.
So there's at least one girl that he directly interacts with, and he apologizes, and she makes him say what he did, like makes Wayne repeat his crime, this murder of her father. And Wayne tries to give her a bunch of money. It's one of the times where he gets incredibly drunk but does not use his gold mine to heal the intoxication. He literally can't do this. He can't bring himself to do this without being incredibly intoxicated. And then he goes throughout the rest of his story in his life after killing this one man as being like the sidekick to Wax, with this one rule of I can't kill anybody. It hurts me too much. It damages my spirit web. He doesn't say it that way, but like that's what's going on. Like, it's against his character's persona after that one death. So maybe something happened like that to Hoid. Either he voluntarily chose, like Wayne, to not kill anyone anymore because it's against his spirit web, or he was forced into kind of an agreement with the shards not to hurt anyone because his power is so great, or potentially can be so great.
Yeah. Lots of possibilities.
Do you want to talk about the world singers?
I mean, we talked about it a little bit. So Hoid is a world singer on Roshar, and we know that because we meet his apprentice, Sigzil, who is a part of Bridge 4.
Bridge 4 forever.
So, you know, the Bridge 4, the men are all learning about each other's past, and Sigzil says that he is a world singer. He tells these stories of other lands, and he lost his master. Later, when Kaladin meets Hoid, Hoid's like, hey, tell my apprentice I say hi, and like, sorry I couldn't save him, and now he's Bridge 4. Yeah. So we like have absolute confirmation that those two go together. I also think that Sigzil is a world hopper. I don't think he's originally from Roshar, because he's described as having like a weird accent, and like he just behaves much differently than people from that world.
It does seem to be strange, though, that he would be so trapped.
I don't think he can travel without Hoid.
That's totally possible, that he is like literally an apprentice. And doesn't have the ability.
Oh, that's actually really sad. He's like stuck on this world that's not his own, and his master like abandoned him.
Yeah, basically. But what did Sigzil actually say?
Yeah, the way he describes the world singers, he says, I am not a foolish jester or storyteller. I do not give tales. I spread knowledge of cultures, peoples, thoughts, and dreams. I bring peace through understanding. It is the holy charge of my order received from the heralds themselves.
So, connecting himself to the heralds, which are definitely Rosharian, that leads me to believe that he is Rosharian himself, but I do understand that description of being kind of out of place, weird accent, could be a world hopper as well.
Well, but I think also, wouldn't you think that most world hoppers probably know how to sort of blend in?
Oh, absolutely.
So, you know, he may be thinking it's more of a divine gift.
I'm not saying that he's never world hopped. I'm saying that he might be Rosharian, and then Hoid comes down and says, you're my new apprentice, let's go check out the Cosmere.
Yeah, totally true.
And then comes back to Roshar.
Yeah, true.
Now, one of the things that I loved most, and reading it the first time, it was just a powerhouse moment for me, is in a conversation between Hoid and Dalinar. In this conversation, Dalinar is kind of getting more friendly with Hoid, and Hoid has given him some heads up about, watch out for Sadius. keep your eyes peeled, don't let your guard down type of thing. Like, people are after you right now. And I believe that's in regards to the visions going public in that story. Yeah. Dalinar is starting to trust Hoid a little bit, and he's kind of expressing this trust, expressing this, hey man, he's and I...
thanks, I appreciate it.
Yeah, you and I are on the same team, right? And then Hoid says this line, and it's probably my favorite line from Hoid in any of the books. I mean, I love the stories that he tells, the Wandersail and Fleet, but this kind of line, to me, is the essence of Hoid. Hoid says to Dalinar, quote, I am but a man, Dalinar, so much as I wish it were not true at times. I am no radiant, and while I am your friend, please understand that our goals do not completely align. You must not trust yourself with me. If I have to watch this world crumble and burn to get what I need, I will do so. With tears, yes, but I would let it happen.
Oh, man. And I remember reading that for the first time and being, like, so hurt. Because I had come to think of Hoid as this, like, benevolent character sort of traveling the Cosmere, helping out my friend characters. And then he says that, and I was like, oh my god. What? Why?
I mean, watch the world burn is
so strong.
Way stronger than just like, hey man, you probably shouldn't trust me, I got other things to do.
Right, and even stronger than like, our goals do not completely align. Like, okay, cool. Yeah. But he is literally like, I will destroy your entire world.
If it helps me get what I need.
Yeah.
Not like, it might be sad. I might.
So intense.
But I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, I need this thing to happen. We don't know what that thing is.
And it also, it tells you a lot about this scale of what Hoid is doing.
He doesn't
it's
care
gigantic.
about these little games. Like, he and all the shards in one way or another are playing these kind of subtle games that looks like to us, but they're playing on a big scale.
Big, yeah.
And the idea that Hoid would literally watch Rashar burn, or may, I mean, we don't know this, but he may be playing up certain aspects of destruction as well. Like, we don't know what's going on. Oathbringer is not out yet, so we don't have any kind of secret knowledge about how Hoid is interacting with the Voidbringers or anything like that, and we don't know if he would be. I doubt it.
But we don't know.
We don't know what his goals are.
Yeah, with as much power as he has, with as much as he knows, like, he could literally be doing anything. And I think this is a really good segue into talking about the letters that are in the epigraphs of Way of Kings.
I completely agree, because
it speaks a lot to Hoid's motive.
The first letter, there are two letters that we see, and the first one we are pretty sure is written by Hoid. All indications seem to point to Hoid. And then it seems to be that the second letter is a reply letter to Hoid.
Yeah.
So the question remains, in letter 1, who is Hoid writing to? And in letter 2, who is the author? But Hoid seems to be involved in both of these letters.
Yeah.
How do you want to tackle this? Do you just want to read the letter itself, or kind of take it piece by piece?
I think we should kind of go piece by piece, because they're pretty long. I don't know if anyone wants to listen to us talk for that long.
Yeah, I mean, there are very just important parts, though, so I feel like we are going to end up quoting quite a bit
for sure.
Letter, but we'll take it piece by piece.
Because that's kind of the point. These letters are another thing that are just full of information.
But they're spread out. They are given as chapter intros. Epigraphs to part 2 of The Way of Kings, and then part 4 of Words of Radiance.
Yeah, so you read them piece by piece, and then when you see them all together as one letter, you're like, oh, dang!
Exactly. So let's start with letter 1, which we believe is written by Hoid. Yep. Makes its first appearance as an epigraph in part 2 of The Way of Kings.
Yep.
It begins saying, written by Hoid, Old friend, I hope this missive finds you well. Though, as you are now essentially immortal, I would guess that wellness on your part is something of a given. I realize that you are probably still angry. That is pleasant to know. Much as your perpetual health, I have come to rely upon your dissatisfaction with me. It is one of the Cosmere's great constants, I should think.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that we gain from that is the very prevalent theory that the recipient of the letter is a dragon.
An immortal dragon.
Yes.
From Dragonsteel Prime. Now, that is currently, we know for a fact, word of Brandon, that it is a dragon. What dragon, we do not know.
Yeah, suspected to be Frost, but...
Yes, and just to help people, because I haven't even read these, there are 4 copies of Brandon Sanderson's master's thesis, which is entitled Dragonsteel Prime.
I think that's one of the things, though, that Brandon just kind of said, please don't read it, because I'm probably going to change a bunch of things, and, just please don't. But so I haven't. I've respected the word of Brandon.
You also can't read it without going to Brigham Young University, which is where Brandon went and where he still teaches. They are not digitally available. They are available to people who check them out, BYU Library. So... I don't know too much about the book. I haven't read it. You haven't read it. But we know that one of the characters in that book is the dragon Frost, who
I believe is also... There's also another, very early thing that I think is actually available digitally called The Lyre of Partenel? I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's another one that he's like, please don't read it. I'm probably going to change a bunch of stuff. That's old.
So we're pretty sure...
We think it's a dragon.
We think it's a dragon. Okay. It might be Frost. Let's go next.
This next sentence, let me assure you that the element is quite safe. I have found a good home for it. I protect its safety like I protect my own skin, you might say. So this is kind of what I was talking about earlier. We know he has a bead of Lerasium. That could be what he's referencing as the element. In which case he says it's safe, which would mean he hadn't ingested it yet. Right. But we don't know that for sure. Yeah. But it's just a little hint.
He does say, I protect it like my own skin, which might hint that he has ingested it and he's protecting it as his body. The same way I would keep my body alive, I will keep this bead.
Or what if he turned it into a hemalurgic spike?
And put it inside himself?
Yeah.
What would that even do? Would that give you all Mistborn powers?
Maybe, but then he would be able to take it out if he wanted to?
And trade it or use it as leverage or something?
That could be it. Right?
We're developing theories right now. We have no idea.
Talk to us on the social internet webs.
Yep.
Tell us what you think.
Exactly. Hoid says, you do not agree with my quest. I understand that. So much as it is possible to understand someone with whom I disagree so completely.
Yeah, and he goes on to talk about the vessels.
Yes.
He says, Ati was once a kind and generous man, and you saw what became of him.
When he picked up the shard ruin.
Exactly. Reza, on the other hand, was among the most loathsome, crafty, and dangerous individuals I had ever met. He holds the most frightening and terrible of all the shards.
Odium.
Exactly. Ponder on that for a time, you old reptile.
Dragon!
And tell me if your insistence on non-intervention holds firm, because I assure you, Reza will not be similarly inhibited. You need only look at the aftermath of his brief visit to Cell to see proof of what I say.
Now, that last line is referring to the destruction of Demotion and Dominion on the planet Cell.
Yeah.
So, this letter written by Hoid to a dragon, old reptile, is pointing out that even the nicest person who picks up the shard ruin will become ruinous. The effect is powerful. What happens when a truly evil, crafty, cunning, and motivated person picks up odium?
Yeah, exactly. And so this is sort of the crux of... Well, it speaks to that larger playing field as we were talking about. So we have Hoid, someone who is obviously very invested and participatory in the events of the Cosmere. We see him everywhere. We see him doing things, pushing pieces in specific ways. And then there is another faction we know that's out there who has this policy of non-intervention. That's just hey man, just let it play out.
Now, the next paragraph that we see from Hoid in this letter says, "You have accused me of perpetrating my grudge against Rasa and Bavadin." Now, Bavadin is the vessel Autonomy.
Oh, do we know that for sure?
Yes.
Okay.
So Bavadin is the original. We don't know.
Okay, if he's still... Yeah.
But the original vessel of Autonomy on the planet Taldane, book White Sand.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Is Bavadin. Now, there is also heavy speculation that the Scadrial god...
Oh, yeah, Trell.
Trell
is Autonomy.
Is Autonomy. And that in... Well, first, I guess, introduced by Zazed.
Yeah.
Zazed himself in Mistborn Era 1, but then really started to be explored in Mistborn Era 2. We have the possibility that Autonomy is attacking Scadrial.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it when you get to Mistborn Era 2.
And Hoid, in this letter, specifically calls out both Odium and Autonomy as someone that he has a grudge against. So it's possible that Odium actually has some support, some help from Autonomy.
Yeah, sure.
That he's building up an army of shards, and then, other shards... They're going to
try to destroy the other shards and, rule the Cosmere.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And I don't know how that plays out, but Hoid links both Autonomy and Rays in this letter.
Yeah. And then this next part will kind of bring us home here.
Mm-hmm.
I am being chased. Your friends of the 17th Shard, I suspect. I believe they're still lost, following a false trail I left for them. They'll be happier that way. I doubt they have any inkling what to do with me should they actually catch me. So this harkens back to that interlude that we see with Ishik in the Pure Lake, meeting with people, very, very strange people for Roshar, who are world hoppers.
World hoppers, and we'll talk about that. And I think
this is the first time that we hear the phrase, the 17th Shard.
Yes.
Yeah. So, as we know, there are 16 shards of Adonalsium. The 17th shard is our group of world hoppers.
Absolutely, and we'll look at them in depth in our next episode.
Yeah.
Now, the very end of the first letter written by Hoid says this:
"For I have never been dedicated to a more important purpose, and the very pillars of the sky will shake with the result of our war here.
I ask again, support me. Do not stand aside and let disaster consume more lives. I've never begged you for something before, old friend. I do so now." There is so much going on in this letter, and one of the most exciting things about Oathbringer, to me, is that we get more of this Cosmere information given to us kind of in epigraph form or just in straight chapters with wit.
Yeah, absolutely. We go to the response letter.
The response letter. Let's do it.
Okay. Starts out, "I'll address this letter to my old friend, as I have no idea what name you're currently using." We just talked about all of Hoid's names. "Have you given up the gemstone now that it is dead?"
Boom. Right there. I'm just making this connection myself.
Yeah, go.
Hoid said that he was named after the rock. I guessed that it was a shard. The response, who we believe might be Frost the Dragon, says, "Have you given up the gemstone now that it is dead?"
Have you given up on the gemstone?
On the gemstone.
Yeah,
now that
like he has lost faith in it or something?
In devotion?
I don't know.
I have no idea
So
either.
interesting. We don't know. What's the gemstone? If you have ideas, tell us.
Please tell us.
Because I'm also thinking, I just read the part in Words of Radiance where we see that Mraize has this pink crystal that seems to be very flaky, like it's gonna fall apart. So that could be this gemstone that is dead. I don't know. Who knows?
And there is a physical realm existence of the shards. I mean, it is a physical thing. True.
Yeah, so absolutely. It could be the physical manifestation of a shard. Shard's dead, so now the physical part is kind of deteriorating also. Oh, I like that theory.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we're gonna, we can continue talking about Hoid's name, And do you no longer hide behind the name of your old master? I am told that in your current incarnation, you've taken a name that references what you presume to be one of your virtues. Wit. This is, I suspect, a little like a skunk naming itself for its stench. So I think this whole first paragraph serves to emphasize that it is, in fact, being written to Hoid,
yes.
right? Like, there's no really doubting that after that first paragraph.
Yes. And I still do name you a friend for all that you weary me. Yes, I'm disappointed, perpetually, as you put it. Is not the destruction we have wrought enough? Now, this is what I was hinting at earlier as well. Hoid may have had some moment in the past where he caused great destruction. It's entirely possible that Hoid was in some way responsible for opening up devotion and dominion to destruction and maybe death that rolled off of that.
I thought they were talking about even before that.
It's
like,
totally
I took this as the fact that they shattered Adonalsium in the first place. I was like, look what happened.
That is absolutely a fair reading as well. It's just, I'm trying to get at this idea of, like, what happened to Hoid in his past, like Wayne happened.
Yeah, sure.
That's all the connections that I'm looking for. But I agree. It could have just been, hey, we did this stupid thing back in the day when we literally destroyed God. That was not good.
And I say that just because he uses "we have wrought," not just Hoid has wrought.
Yes.
Yeah.
The author of the second letter continues, the world you now tread bear the touch and design of Adonalsium. Our interference so far has brought nothing but pain. My path has been chosen very deliberately. Yes, I agree with everything you have said about Reza, including the severe danger he presents. However, it seems to me that all things have been set up for a purpose, and if we, as infants, stumble through the workshop, we risk exacerbating, not preventing, a problem.
Such a harmony perspective.
And that is, originally, I thought that Hoid was writing to Harmony and asking him for assistance.
Yeah.
Because of lines like
that,
this. It's very much a Harmony response.
Well, I mean, I guess you would assume that on the sort of cosmic scale, Harmony would be a part of that non-interventionist faction. Right.
Very good. The non-interventionist faction. I like that idea, because we obviously have the evil faction led by Odium. Do we have...
But then, the opposition, you have...
Hoid,
and probably other participants with him, as well as this person he is writing to.
Yes.
Ooh, okay,
now read the next part.
Yeah, it's so significant. Reza is captive. He cannot leave the system he now inhibits. So that's a really important piece of information to know. We know that Odium is not going to be running around destroying other shards because he has to stay on Roshar for whatever, or in the Rosharan system anyway.
Which then leads or lends a little bit of credit to my theory that autonomy is now acting
as like his arm outside of the Rosharan system. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, Scadrial, we know, is being attacked by something.
Yeah.
I think the assumption right now is that it is autonomy, and that's manifesting as the god Trell on the planet. But I think it's because Odium is in his weakened state after shattering Honor. He's obviously rebuilding and close to full strength again. But he's trapped. He's trapped in the Rosharian system. Not on Roshar, but on what planet?
Braze.
Braze, that's right.
Yeah, otherwise known as Damnation. And then we also go on to find out in this letter that millennia have passed without Reza taking the life of another of the 16.
Which most likely refers to Honor as the last one that he killed. Do we believe that's the order? Devotion,
I think so.
Dominion, Honor?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Devotion and Dominion were definitely before Honor. And then, let's see. We find out a little bit more about Odium. The writer of the letter says, Odium bears the weight of God's own divine hatred, separated from the virtues that gave it context. He is what we made him to be, old friend, and that's what he unfortunately wished to become. I suspect that he is more a force than an individual now, despite your insistence to the contrary. That force is contained and an equilibrium reached.
Again, this is why I was so insistent early on that it
was harmony.
It was harmony. This idea of equilibrium is very harmonious. He continues, the author of the letter continues, says, quote, "You, however, have never been a force for equilibrium. You tow chaos behind you like a corpse dragged by one leg through the snow. Please hearken to my plea. Leave that place and join me in my oath of non-intervention. The Cosmere itself may depend upon our restraint." So obviously, this is the line, to me, that points away from harmony and to something else. Now, I believe because of words of Brandon, we know that it's dragon.
Yeah, we know for sure. Yeah.
We know the connections. But I'm just saying, like, this last line, an oath of non-intervention, doesn't strike me as something that harmony would be a part of. It's not that harmony...
Right, for sure.
...doesn't want to intervene. It's that he wants the balance to exist between the two forces
absolutely.
he holds.
I mean, they have very similar perspectives.
Sure. And this author of the second letter is really, really devoted to this idea that restraint is what is necessary, and that the more that people like Hoid get involved, the worse things become. Yeah,
I mean, and I think he has some good points of like, hey, this is the best thing we can hope for. At least now we know that Odium will only be in this one system. The rest of us are safe. Like, that's the best we can hope for.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we get more information after this letter is written, right? Like with this idea that possibly autonomy is working with Odium. Hoid has what I think is kind of a bigger perspective of like, no, you don't understand. Like, we can't just sit back. It's not going to stay perfect forever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no way. We have to take action because there's more going on. We can't just expect Odium to sit by passively and be like, oh, dang, guess I'm trapped here.
Now, I want to leave us, because this has been a fantastic episode. So much information about Hoid and the Cosmere.
Yeah.
I want to leave us with a quote that also is going to play into our episode next week as well, that comes from Chris, who was our scholar.
Chris, our Cosmere scholar.
Yes, I love that little intro. Anytime we say Chris, I want that bit to play. I'm going to recut that out, and it's just me, Chris, our Cosmere scholar. In Mistborn Secret History, Chris says to Kelsier, "Once you step behind the curtain and see the actors as the real people they are, it becomes harder to pretend the play is real." Hoid is living that out. Hoid knows that these are actors on a stage, and he's playing the bigger game.
He's the puppet master
yes,
in some respects.
Absolutely. He's got that going on. Any thoughts you want to leave us with about Hoid or the greater Cosmere?
No, I think that's good. I think we really got in there. So, World Singers, until next time, life before death,
strength before weakness,
journey before destination.
I wanted to personally thank two individuals who have given us the music that you've been listening to on the podcast recently. That piece you just heard as the outro was entitled At Wit's End, and it was created and composed by the Dark-Eyed Musician. Cosmere fans, you can find her on Twitter and on YouTube at Dark-Eyed Music 15. The intro song is entitled Radiant, and it is composed by David Groovier. You can find David on YouTube and Twitter at DGRUWIER, D Groovier. Thank you both so much for allowing us to use the music in the podcast. We really appreciate it.